Welcome back to the Extra Zone Arcade. 2024 has been an interesting year to say the least, but it's been especially interesting for Nintendo. Remakes, remasters and revivals have been the name of the game for them, with the topic of today's video being the latter. Revealed 6 months ago at the time of posting this, at the start of a Nintendo Direct, the world was shocked by the reveal of a new game in the Mario & Luigi RPG series. A series that was thought dead for half a decade due to the developer Alpha Dream closing its doors. Now, it's no secret at this point why that happened. The series had declined massively in sales from 2003's Superstar Saga up to the 3DS remake of Bowser's Inside Story. This was kinda a rare case of Nintendo actually screwing over their teams, because the 3DS remakes released at a time when the Switch was out and already doing crazy numbers. Keeping Alpha Dream locked down there was bad enough, but Nintendo never even thought to just acquire the studio to keep it afloat. I'm usually not one for acquisitions, but if there was any time for that to happen, this should have been it. So yeah, an unprofitable sub-series mixed with the studio behind it being killed off definitely spelled the end for Mario & Luigi. Until it wasn't. The hype was absolutely palpable for this new game leading up to the release, even though Nintendo refused to actually market this thing. Seriously. We got the initial direct trailer and then complete radio silence for the next 3 months. Then they started dropping these 30-second trailers to show off game mechanics and okay, which was then followed by an overview trailer a month before the game's launch. I feel like this has happened with pretty much all of Nintendo's releases this year. They really keep quiet about them up until the last possible moment. And so Mario & Luigi Brothership launched on November 7th, 2024 to a mixed response as far as I can tell. The game is reviewing well, but fans seem to be pretty split on it, and certain review publications were not so kind. IGN infamously giving the game a 5 out of 10 rating, citing the game's pacing issues as a big factor. So, as someone who has limited experience with the Mario & Luigi series, and with this as the first one I've actually played to completion, how did I feel about it? It's complicated. First, as always, let's go over the story. Being an RPG, the story is a huge focus of the game. Mario and Luigi are chilling in the Mushroom Kingdom until Luigi starts getting chased by some bees. He could totally solo those bees, why is my man getting nerfed? Suddenly, their hands start glowing, and one very Mario movie-like scene later, the bros find themselves in a new world known as Concordia. The big theme of this game is electrical appliances, so all the characters are modelled after plug sockets and are sometimes named accordingly. They first meet Connie, a botanist in training who explains to us that the land was once a continent that had been split apart. Her mentor is lost, and so it's up to her to nurture the Unitree in which Connectar flows, the main power source that keeps the island's lighthouses connected. We also meet Snoutlet, who insists he's not a pig and would be our aid for this journey to restore the land back to its original state. As we go between islands, linking them back up and meeting new allies, we eventually come to find out why all the islands were disconnected. Zocket is our big villain of the game, and his goal is to sever the connections between the island and its people so the world can be truly lonely. To that end, he's corrupted Connectar energy to become Gloam, which he intends to use to bring out the loneliness and isolation everyone feels deep within them. He has a whole army behind him to achieve this goal, with his main enforcers being these 3 schmucks, known as the Extension Corps, consisting of X, Ten, and Shun. Yeah, they were not subtle with absolutely any of this. There's a running joke with Zocket being that he doesn't do too well with names, so he constantly gets the name of this group wrong with some pretty funny results. He has another motive though. There's this mysterious egg he's watching over that seems to grow the more Gloam energy it consumes. As the quest continues, we meet more and more familiar faces to Mario, such as the Toads, Princess Peach and Starlo, who returns from previous Mario & Luigi games, as well as Bowser, Jr. and their army. The effects of Gloam become more and more apparent as we close in on Zocket's fortress and fight Bowser, corrupted by this negative energy. The bros barely escape with their lives, but then meet with the Great Conductor, who was actually Snoutlet's mentor, and understand the true power of their bond. They take the fight back to Zocket once again and reveal that it was actually Connie's mentor, Cosette, behind the mask. Zocket, Cosette, you can kinda see what they did there, but it's too late. Enough Gloam was collected to hatch the egg, revealing Reclusa, the true villain of this story. He has this childlike temperament to him that actually does make him pretty creepy. His first order of business is to use these strange flowers to trap people, giving them illusions of a perfect life all alone. To further that goal, he creates the Solitary to be a place where operating and controlling this kind of world will be all the more simple. The bros now have to collect the most prevalent bonds from the people they've met during the adventure, such as Connie and Cosette, Wilma and her children, Build It and Make It, the Idol Group, Groove Master Diode and his apprentice Emmett, Chilliam and Bernadette, Bowser Jr. and his new friend Buddy, and the newly reformed Extension Corps. Using the literal power of friendship, Mario and Luigi burst into the Solitary to confront Reclusa. They're then given a taste of that perfect fantasy land in the form of a literal creepypasta moment. Seriously, if this scene with Peach had dropped in the early 2010s, people would have gone crazy. With their will of iron, the Mario Bros break out of the illusion to take on the big bad, but backed into a corner, Reclusa fuses with the Solitary to become Weeping Reclusa. After a couple more boss phases, they lay into the havoc-wreaking loner, showing him that friendship truly is magic. With the land restored and gloom dissipated, it's time for the Mushroom Kingdom's residents to go back home in a pretty heartfelt ending scene. So that's about the gist of the story. Overall, it keeps things pretty simple without being entirely predictable, even if it does take a while for anything to get started. You only really get a good feel for what's going on about 5 hours into the game, where we learn about the Extension Corps and Zocket hauling people off to work in the Gloam mines. After that, it kinda meanders in the middle, mostly to focus on character development. That's always nice, but it does feel like the actual main plot takes a backseat for a while there, with islands like Heat Freeze Island feeling like it has little to do with what's actually going on. But things do pick up significantly at the end and culminate in a genuinely satisfying conclusion, even if it is drawn out, which we will definitely be talking about later. For now though, let's talk about that gameplay. For the most part, the gameplay remains unchanged from how the series was prior. The most notable differences here are actually with Luigi. In previous games, you would control both brothers in the overworld, so you had to be more attentive to how you move around. This time, Luigi is AI controlled, with you only being able to get him to jump, barring sections where he's solo, and obviously you have full control over his movements. This can cause issues sometimes, where you might go to hit blocks set up like this, and Luigi won't get into a position where you can comfortably hit them using him. Or during these numbered tile sections, where he doesn't wait a damn second for you to figure out and go to the next tile you need to press, causing you to have to restart it. On top of that, if the bros end up getting too far away from each other, this very intrusive 5-second cutscene will play before you can even move again. This last one is mostly a nitpick, but it took me a good few hours to get used to the fact that Luigi's menu actions are selected with the A button instead of B, just like the previous games and all his attack actions are. Just a strange design choice in my opinion. Speaking of attack actions, the combat in this game is probably its greatest strength. That's not really anything new for this series, but they nailed it once again. This time, all attacks are actually done with both Mario and Luigi. You jump on an enemy with Mario and Luigi comes in to boost him back up for another. Or, you go strike an enemy with Luigi's hammer, where Mario will come in to help you make the attack stronger. This is a genuinely good change that also reflects the theme of the game well, not to mention that it never gets old how satisfying these are to do. And that's just the basic attacks. The bros attacks get pretty wild this time around. The red and green shells let you do Mario Strikers-esque finishes if performed with an excellent rating, and Hatch Me If You Can has the bros volley a Yoshi egg to the enemies until it hatches, revealing a Yoshi that delivers a devastating ground pound to your foe. That one was my go-to for a lot of the game, as well as the Zapparator that has you alternate pressing A and B in rapid succession to build up this cloud that shocks enemies. Great for crowd control. I won't talk about all of them here since we could be here forever, and it's actually worth experiencing them for yourself firsthand. Some of them can be pretty difficult to use at first, but with a bit of practice, it becomes second nature. You also get a variety of bros moves in the overworld, like the UFO spin that lets you cross over large gaps and eventually suck up items and enemies. There's also the fire and ice flowers that function like they do normally, with a powered up version later that lets you summon a small explosion. And then there's the bros ball that lets you roll around like it's Sonic 4 Episode 2. Hell, you even unlock the ability to do an actual spin dash with the same animation and everything. Ripping off a series that recently got a higher review score for their new game, I see. You're not slick, Nintendo. Also, review for that coming next week, make sure you're subscribed. Now, it's time to talk about the big new feature of this game. That being Luigi logic. Feeling stuck in an overworld section or having a hard time fighting a boss? Luigi's got you covered with his uncanny ability to solve every problem in the most slapstick way possible. Take this ledge for instance. Way too high to jump up normally, but worry not, Luigi logicked up the ability to just swim in the air and grab it. Or how about this moment where he uses his logic to remember that he's still a plumber, uses his hammer to fix up the pipes and spray water at this boss. Not all of Luigi's logic is thought up equally though. Some solutions seem incredibly obvious to anyone who's even paying slight attention to the game, while others genuinely did surprise me. It was a neat little mechanic for this game that really highlighted Luigi's personality, but at times I honestly felt like Mario was taking a back seat. He doesn't get a whole lot to do, and I feel his personality doesn't shine through as much in this game as a result, both in battles and in cutscenes. You can tell the devs are all huge Luigi fans. I mean, just look at the way all the characters talk about him here. He's treated like a goddamn deity at times. He is the GOAT though, so I get it. Gameplay wise, this thing is pretty much as solid as most other Mario RPGs, with only a few minor things I think could be tweaked and a tiny bit more polish. There are times like when I go to attack enemies in the overworld to get the first hit in battle and Mario somehow misses despite it looking like it clearly landed on the guy, or even just something like enemy attack animations not being super clear. The game seemingly runs at 24 FPS, which isn't a problem, but it can make certain actions look choppy. Where it does become a problem is when the game drops even further below those 24 frames. This happens pretty frequently, especially near the end of the game where the frame rate felt it was almost dipping into single digits. Now, I don't know if it's like this for everyone or it's just my Switch being an older model, but god damn it's distracting. And then there's the horrifically long load times. They can range from a pretty excusable 10 seconds all the way to an excruciating 25. And there are a lot of loading screens, so that really adds up quickly. Going back through my footage for that playthrough had me cut probably over 3 hours worth of loading screens. That just sucks no matter how you slice it. But Switch games as of recent seem to be struggling with performance issues a lot. Take Princess Peach Showtime for instance, the frame rate was very unstable there. It could be that these games are more optimized for the upcoming Switch 2, but just weird and very unlike Nintendo to release their big titles like this. Still though, I can mostly overlook these problems and tell you that the gameplay is truly a great experience from start to finish. It was one of the few aspects of the game I didn't get tired of as it went on, and the addition of the new battle plugs really spiced things up. There was a level of strategy and forward thinking that they brought that really had me weighing up my options. You even have the ability to combine battle plug perks to make them even stronger. Really just a ton of depth that I'm confident I didn't even scratch the surface of. I can tell you though that the side content is the opposite of that. From what I can tell, because I personally didn't bother with the majority of them, the side quests don't add much value to the experience. They mostly seem to be fetch quests with overly long dialogue that only really yields some mediocre reward. Not worth doing, especially since some of them are actually context sensitive and can't be done if you progress past a certain point in the story. I hate when RPGs have mechanics like that, even as someone who's typically not a completionist. Locking content like that is just bad design, plain and simple. Especially in this game's case, as they don't even properly signal to you when time is up to do it. So, save yourself the stress and skip all that if you plan to play this game that already has an extremely bloated runtime. Oh, I guess it's time in the review where I absolutely go off, isn't it? Okay, here we go. Why, in God's name, is this game so fucking long? This is the longest game in the entire Mario & Luigi series by quite a bit, and probably the longest Mario game ever, even if you're just gunning it to the credits. Seriously, we're talking about a 40+ hour experience. Sure, in the hands of a better player, because I will admit I'm not all that great at RPGs, you could probably finish it faster. But the point isn't purely about the length, oh no. The pacing is the real culprit here. As I mentioned in the story segment, the plot takes a good 5 hours to actually get going. That's true for the game as a whole. You don't get the hammer until 5 to 6 hours in, and you don't unlock the first bros move until after the Great Lighthouse, and they don't even explain the battle plug system or what sprite bobs do until 8 hours in. For reference, that's 2/3 the entire length of Super Mario RPG, which just had its remake released last November. So yeah, the game takes a good while to actually get started, but the pacing is pretty much perfect around the middle to latter portion, even if the story does trail off a bit. But then you get towards the end of the 4th sea, and the game feels like it's entirely run its course. By this point, it's around 30 hours in, and they really start playing around with the whole, oh, looks like you're at the end of the game, better be prepared for the final confrontation. Psych! You actually have to do another 3 hours worth of fetch quests full of overbearing dialogue just to get to a similar point, and then you're still not even done. It really pisses me off when games do this because it feels like I'm being blatantly told that they do not respect my time. There are at least 3 separate occasions where this happens, and it left me groaning and wishing it could just be done more and more every time. Mario games have always been lauded for their accessibility. The fact you can pick them up and play them easily regardless of the genre. That's what makes Mario RPG great. That's what makes Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door great. Both games that released in the same 12-month time frame as Brothership. Those games respect your time. Most casual players are going to see how big of a time commitment it is to finish this game and decide they'll pass. I absolutely don't blame them. Towards the end of the playthrough, I even eased up on the editing just because it was too much work and I was sick to death of seeing this game. You can bet your ass I'm not coming back to this thing once the review is done. Not anytime soon. Alright, rant over. I know some of you watching this may not see it as that big of a deal, but that really is the type of thing that leaves a bad taste in my mouth when all is said and done. I much prefer a shorter game that's well paced and consistently fun from start to finish, than a game that just keeps going and going with sloppy pacing throughout. As I said though, the game ends strongly enough to where it did gain some good points back for me. Some. Let's get back to talking about the things I like, starting with the graphics and art style. I really think they nailed the aesthetics on this one. They translated the illustrative style of the previous games perfectly into a 3D world, resulting in what I think is one of the most visually pleasing games on the Switch. Environments pop with color, characters are beautifully animated, especially the bros when in combat, and the visual effects are striking. The squash and stretch animation really does wonders to elevate the game feel, and even the little visual gags like Luigi learning to land on his feet as the game goes on were a treat to see. This series has never missed in that aspect, and I'm glad to see the trend continue here. I do think I would have liked some more variation in the original character designs for this game. We really could have done more with the electrical appliance theme. Like, we could have had a boss themed after a washing machine, or an ally that looks like those little Wi-Fi antenna you screw onto your PC. Keeping within the plug socket design for all the NPCs kinda make them all blend together after a while, and doesn't allow them to stand out enough outside of the writing. But what they do within that is fine enough. In terms of the soundtrack, it's pretty forgettable for Mario and Luigi standards. Outside of the battle theme, boss theme, and music for Shipshape Island, I can't recall any melodies from this one. It's not that any of it is bad, just that there weren't as many earworms as I've come to expect from this series. Overall though, the presentation was fantastic as you'd expect in any Mario RPG. So that's about all, but there is just one last thing I want to cover. The future of the Mario and Luigi series was unsure prior to the announcement of Brothership for reasons we discussed at the top of the video. With the game out now and recent news about a potential acquisition of the development team behind it, ironically enough named Acquire, by Sony, the series' future is possibly in jeopardy again. I also feel that the game's reception, while still mostly positive, has been swayed a lot by the IGN review. A review that gave a pretty damn harsh score, but actually had a lot of points I found myself and others agreeing with. If this series does have a future ahead of it, how are they going to address that? Will they address it? Only time, and of course money, will tell. And you've made it all the way to the end. Overall, Mario & Luigi Brothership is a good game that's ultimately bogged down by horrible pacing at the beginning and end, overly bloated runtime, repetitive dialogue, and pointless side content. A 5 out of 10 is definitely harsh, so I would rate it more around a 6.5. Though you could probably extrapolate that from what I already said. Hence why I don't do number ratings in these. But what did you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you agree with my take here? Do you think I'm way off and that this game is peak? Or maybe you think IGN was right? Make sure you're subscribed here for more content like this. If you made it to the end, I think I've probably earned that. And you can always unsub later if you find you're not really messing with it. Check out the live channel and Twitch linked in the description. We always stream there at least once a week and it's a pretty good time. We're actually hosting an awards show on December 20th focused around all the content I've released this year. Keep your eyes peeled next week for a remaster with a new campaign featuring a certain Edgy Hedgy, and I'll see you there. Take care.